Hello guys, Zero here. So today I want to share you something which is really close to my heart, and it is the pkexec utilities binary exploit in 2021. This was a pretty sick exploit. I mean, looking at this exploit, it's really wild and it was used in many exploits. So what pkexec 2021 exploit actually is? So I have pulled off the CVE here. It was in 2021 4034 CVE. So basically it is a local privilege escalation vulnerability which was found in Polkit's pkexec utility. Now if you have this pkexec utility which has SUID bit set, then you can run any command as root user. Now this is the entire thing about local privilege escalation. You can run a command as root without write privileges or without kind of set privileges. But what actually is pkexec utility? Pkexec utility is used for, suppose there are two users, user A and user B. User B has certain privileges to run some of the commands as user A. This can be set up using pkexecute. So pkexecute is basically like giving another user permission to run any command as you. But if pkexecute has a set UID, then anyone can run pkexecute binary itself as root, which might lead to arbitrary code or command execution as root. Unprivileged and privileged accounts. The current version of pkexecute, which is like in 2021, it was 0. I think so. The version was 0105. This version was vulnerable. Now it is updated, so nothing to worry about. Doesn't handle the calling parameters count correctly. Now what happens whenever you execute a binary? Either there are parameters or there are no parameters. But in past years, some of the developers had built certain binaries which kind of assumes that there are parameters without checking if there are. So in C coding, a particular binary has no direct access to know how many parameters are there. So this vulnerability is quite naive or quite common in binary exploitation, because there is no direct way to verify how many arguments are there, or are there even arguments by the user, and ends up trying execute environment variable as command. Now what this means is, if you normally run pkexecute command without any arguments, then it will go look into the environment variables, but it assumes like there are arguments. If you run pkexecute with arguments, then it will take those arguments. But if you run pkexecute without arguments, then it will go and look for into environment variables for arguments. If the attacker controls the environment variable, he controls pkexecute utility, and if pkexecute utility has set UID bit, then he can execute any command as root. Now what are the requirements? There are certain requirements that you must have. First of the requirement is pkexecute should be SUID, and it should be of below or of this version. Let's do it version. Let's make it should be equal to 0.105. Yeah, this is one of the requirements. Now you will say, okay, that's it. You have the SUID bit set and you also have the vulnerable version. But this will still not work, because you need one more thing. You need glibc version below or equal to, I think so it was 2.23. Yeah. If glib version is greater than this version, no, I think so it was 2025. Now, this is not documented anywhere. This is like my personal experience. I had this requirement fulfilled in one of the machines, but the glib version was updated. It was about 2.25, I believe, and let's make it 2.26 for safety reasons. Yeah. So glib version was 2.26, and I was not able to execute my exploit of pkexec and could not able to achieve the root access. So I figured out a lot of things, but I finally figured out that glib version, this particular version or the versions after this, have a safety guard which kind of blocks my exploit, even if this binary is vulnerable. So we will look into that, but you require these two requirements, like you need these two things. And so what else we have here? So when an attacker controls the environment variable, it declares three important environment variables. The first environment variable is the path variable. Let me write here. Okay, so path variable. The path variable will include this value, which is a G conversion path. Now, by default, there is a G conversion path in Linux which goes to some place, but here we are controlling and telling the binary to take the G conversion path into the current directory and not the default directory. Then there is a shell variable which has this value. This value can be anything because we don't need this to be like a real thing. And we also have a char set. Now here we can write malicious. Malicious. So this char set will coordinate with this G conversion path, and it will be used in G conversion module to execute our .so file, which is a malicious.so file. So what exactly we are doing here is the pkexec will go into the environment variables, will go here in the current directory, in the G path current directory, will look for char set, will look for the module, and it will ask module of what conversion to use. The conversion, the char set conversion, it will say is malicious. Use malicious as the word. So it will go to the malicious char set and it will execute the .so file of that char set, and this is our exploit. This is our malicious file which will get executed, and this can be anything. So let's have a look at one of the exploits. So this is quite a popular exploit for this vulnerability, but there are two C source file and there is one bash file, and this is kind of very not beginner friendly because there are too many files here, and it will be pretty hard for any beginner to kind of map of what exploit of what file is calling which thing, and you can not figure out what exactly is happening behind the exploit. So I created one of my own exploit for this, and let me see. Yeah, it is here. So we can go into CV 2008, and this is a single file exploit. You just have to execute this in any of the machine which is vulnerable, and you can get the root shell. So let's see what exactly this file is doing. Firstly, it is setting up the environment. Then it is creating a .c file. This is our malicious binary. It has an argument of bin bash because we want a reverse, not a reverse shell, we want a root shell here. And it also sets the path variable. Now this is important because generally when you do not mention the path variable, you will get the shell, but you will not able to execute like commands this easily. Like if I do, suppose who am I, if I run this, then what it is actually doing is it is going to my USR bin and it is finding who am I. But this is because my path variable is set. If my path variable was not set, then I would have to do the entire thing. Like I would have to do the whole thing like this, and then I will get the command. So that is why path variable is important. it will call the argument 0, which is our malicious file, with this argument, which is bin bash, and it will set up the environment variable to path. Then it will convert our .c file into .so file. This is our malicious .so file, which will get executed and will give us the root shell. But before that, we also need a gconversion file, which is a gconversion module. Gconversion module basically defines that anything in UTF-8 should be converted to 0 module. Now, what is 0? If you see, I have declared a charge set named 0 here. So I previously described that here I have to charge set as malicious. So this will go into this module file and it will look here, okay, I have to convert this charge set to charge set 0, and then it will call the 0.so malicious file. Now note that here that this gconversion module is used for converting kind of .so files and calling them, but you need to have the right name here. You cannot have separate names here. This should be the exact same names, because you are defining the char set to be used here, and you must have the same char set here. Then only it will execute your .so file. Then we are creating a directory with this name. So our path variable was set to this. So it will go to this directory and look for the .so file. We are also copying the .so file in this manner to this directory. Then we are creating another C source file, which is kind of the final exploit. It will have 0 arguments, if you can see, null arguments, but it will have some environment variables. First, we are defining the malicious.so file as our environment variable. Then we are defining the path variable to our gconvert path current directory. Then we are declaring a shell variable. This can be anything. It is not mandatory to write any real file here. Then we are declaring char set here, which should match our module's conversion name here. And then we are using GOUs VFS. Now this is not important, but I just wrote it because it has some functionality. But if you kind of skip this also, it will still run. And it executes the pkexec utility with null arguments. So it will go to the environment variables, which are set here, and it will execute this. So now I have shown how the exploit is working. Now let's see some practical for it. I already have a machine, I believe. Oh, sorry, my bad. So in TryHackMe, Kenobi machine is vulnerable to this, but this is not intended Kenobi's local privilege escalation path. I found it when I was researching on this Kenobi's machine. I found that this was vulnerable to this also. So I tried to execute it, and luckily it got executed because it was fulfilling all the necessary requirements that the exploit needs to run. Look here, I also have the exploit copied here. If you can see, this is the same exploit that I showed onto my local machine. But before that, let's see if we have all the requirements set. So we will see what are the binaries that we can run with suid pit set. Oh, my bad, sorry. So we have pkexecute utility, yep. So there is a suid pit set. One of the requirements is fulfilled. Now let's see for other one. What is the version of pkexecutable here? Okay, the version is fulfilled. Great. But let's see what is the version of our glib thing. So glib is 2.23, which is good. Which, like we can execute our exploit here. But if this was something around 2.27 or 2.26, then exploit might not work because glib has a safeguard. So let me show what safeguard it is. So if you have, let me just go down. If you have a glib thing with 2026, I believe, let's take it 26 only, then it will not allow you to use zero or malicious or any name char set. So this is because if you can see in my exploit, then we are using a unique and user defined char set, but glib 2.26 and above versions do not allow this. You cannot use user-defined char set doing this, so that's why this will not execute the exploit. So that's why you need this. So let me just again quickly log in to the Kenobi using SSH. Okay, so we are unprivileged users. We will execute our exploit, and you can find this exploit in my GitHub. I'll be keeping the link on my Discord server, and also the link would be there below the video somewhere, so you can find this exploit there. So let's run this exploit. You just have to execute this one file and you will get the root shell if all the requirements are fulfilled. Bingo, we are root. Let's see if we are actually root. Yeah, we are root. Let's see if we can go to the root, and yeah, we are root. So we have the root.txt. I cannot show the root.txt because it's not with the policies of TryHackMe, but you can see that we are root. If you do cd, then home directory is not set. This is because you can see in our C file we only declared the path variable. We haven't declared any home variable there. So that's why path variable was important. So we can use commands like this without any problem. So this was it. If you need to understand about this exploit more, then you can contact